Good morning. We are grateful to gather online this morning as the Unitarian Universalist Society for a time of music, inspirational words, reflection, and connection. I'm Margaret Kinsman, your worship associate for this morning. If you are visiting our service today, welcome. We hope you find the service meaningful. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't all believe the same things, but we turn to 7 principles that guide us in living out our values in the world. One of those principles is acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Today, we especially reflect on that principle as we celebrate what binds us together and how we can nourish our own and each other's hearts. And now, Reverend Diana.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Diana Smith, the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Society, and it's wonderful to be with you all this morning. In these times of change, it's so important to be together, to come together as a spiritual community, to gain the sustenance that we each and all need, and to help nourish each other. As members of a covenantal faith that expresses our core value of love through how we agree to be together and to support each other, it is good to come together and affirm that even when we cannot be together in body, this congregation remains strong and connected. To affirm that we have faith and hope in this congregation, in each other, and in the ways we continue to grow together during the challenges of life. And to affirm that wherever any of us is on our life's journey, whether we come to worship with joy in our hearts, weighted with burdens, in need of rest, or searching for people to engage in the struggle with us, we are glad. And this community is glad that we are here. And so, we begin our service today with words from the Reverend Elizabeth Mount, who writes, "From our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is in our nature. We find our cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this great turning planet. By turning to one another, generation to generation, we awaken to the dawn and fall asleep at the river's end, at the evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without air. And we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. May we reach out to one another. May we offer love and nurturing care. May we join together in celebration of the interdependence of our lives. In this spirit, let us worship together. And let's begin by joining our voices from our many, many different locations as we sing Spirit of Life.
Morning, everybody. We're going to sing this through twice, once with Come Unto Me, and once with Spirit of Life, Come Unto Us. It'll be on the slides for you. Spirit of life, come unto me. In my heart, all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto us. Stir in our hearts all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold us close, wings set us free. Spirit of life, come to us, come to us.
Thank you. It was lovely. As Unitarian Universalists, we light a flame within a chalice as a symbol of sanctuary and safety to unite us in our worship and to remind us of our ongoing search for the light of truth. Please join me in the words as I light the flame. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the wonder and mystery of this great gift. So let us now kindle the flame of our liberal religious heritage and renew our covenant of mutual love and care. Love is our doctrine, the quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to serve those in need. This we promise, this we covenant with life and one another. Each week when we light a candle for justice and healing, we hold space for our understanding of interdependence, that our liberation is bound up with every other person's liberation, and our feelings of rage and heartbreak over the ongoing pandemics of illness and racism, the devastation of climate chaos, and the waves of trauma washing over our world. We light this candle to help us hold space together for processing what is happening in our lives and in our world, and to remind ourselves that together we are creating resilience and hope. We light this candle that we may not be numbed or lost to injustice, devastation, illness, and trauma, but rather find strength, courage, and love together to continue engaging with the struggles for liberation, justice, and healing. I'm going to light the candle and then tell you who we're lighting it for. This morning's candle is lit as we think of the medical services community who keep our hospitals functioning. The cleaners, porters, admin staff, lab personnel, nurses, doctors, ambulance crews, and many others who are delivering justice and healing to sick people. Aware that many medical staff must be at breaking point as we head into year 3 of pandemic, our hearts and minds go out to them with gratitude. Let's hold a time of silence to listen to our hearts and bodies, or perhaps to lift up prayers. As Alex and Xinwei share our centering music, please take this time to sink more deeply into the presence of each other, joining in the singing if you wish. If you're online participating in the service and you'd like, please turn your cameras on and spend this time beholding each other's faces, each other's presence. And please feel free to use the chat to let us know that your chalice is lit.
This song may be new for quite a few of us, so we'll sing it twice. If you catch on, join in. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest in love. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all I rest.
Our story this morning is The Hole Boy, from Ancient Stories for Modern Times by Faye Mogenson. Long ago and far away, and yet not so long ago and not so far away, there was a boy. He was an ordinary boy in every way, except that he felt as though he were full of holes. He felt as though he had holes everywhere, in his heart, in his head, in his arms, in his legs. He felt he had so many holes in his body that he called himself Hole Boy, hole with an H. This feeling of being full of holes made the boy sad and mad all at once. Maybe you felt that way sometimes. And it stirred up trouble inside him, and so he caused trouble all around him. When the fishers were preparing to set their lines, Hole Boy tangled them. When the farmers were planting their fields, Hole Boy raced through them and trampled the ground. When the musicians were preparing to play, Hole Boy shouted and stomped and screamed as loudly as he could. And when other children were trying to play, Hole Boy found a way to get in their way. The older that Hole Boy grew, the more trouble he caused. People soon had enough, and they let him know. People began to shun him, and he began to shun himself. Finally, it was unbearable to be around him. He could hardly bear himself. But one woman who had watched the boy noticed that the trouble was as much inside of him as it was outside. She had compassion for the boy and believed he could change. She said, "You say that you are full of holes, and you call yourself Hole Boy. You cause trouble, but I think it's this feeling of holes that causes your bad behavior. If you could feel whole with a W, as in complete, maybe everything could change." The woman continued, "If you venture out into the world, I think that you'll find the part of yourself that you're missing. I think that you'll find a boy who also has holes. That boy will make you whole, complete. You'll become Hole Boy with a W. Then you'll find your goodness." Now, the woman's words were puzzling, yet they were like sweet nectar to the boy. Never before had anyone shown faith in him or shown him such kindness. For the first time ever, he felt warmth in his holy heart. For the first time ever, he had hope. So the next morning, Hole Boy set off. His steps were hesitant and uneven, but he made his way through the thick brush and past giant trees. Wind whistled through his holes and blew through him. Branches snagged at him and stopped him short. Vines grabbed him. Animal sounds frightened him. The river roared right at him. It splashed and soaked him, but he journeyed on. Finally, at nightfall, he crept into a village square and asked the people, "Have you seen a boy like me who's full of holes?" They thought about it for a little while. Finally, an old woman said, "I've heard of someone like that, somewhere towards the sunset." So the next morning, Hole Boy set out again, and now he made his way for 2 days through the thick brush and past giant trees. Wind whistled through his holes and blew through him. Branches snagged him and stopped him short. Vines grabbed him. Animal sounds frightened him. The river roared at him. Its spray splashed and soaked him, but he journeyed on. Finally, he came to the next village. When he asked about another Hole Boy, they too pointed towards the sunset. And so, the next morning, you know what happened. Hole Boy set out again, and now he stumbled and bumbled for 3 days through the thick brush and past giant trees. Wind whistled through his holes and blew about him. Branches snagged at him and stopped him short. Vines grabbed him. Animal sounds frightened him. The river roared right at him. Its spray splashed and soaked him, but he journeyed on. On the third day, as he approached a third village, he heard a loud cry, another holy boy has arrived. Before long, Whole Boy saw the other boy, the holy boy, coming towards him. There could be no doubt that it was his other half. They were the same size, and they were each complete in exactly the places where the other one was incomplete. No one knows why, but that's the way they were. The boys recognized themselves in each other. Even so, they weren't quite sure what to make of each other. They circled around each other, sometimes smiling, sometimes suspicious. They began to wrestle. They tussled and they tossed and they swung one another around. They stirred up the dust and the dirt and the water and the air. The wind began to howl, the rain pelted down, thunder roared and lightning flashed. The boys fought all through the night, and the storm raged. At last, the sun rose. All was quiet except the birds, who sang more beautifully than ever before. In the calm of morning, a single boy walked out of the river and into the forest, and out of the forest. He was a whole boy now, a whole boy with a W, meaning complete and without a single hole, except, of course, for the ones we all have. Whole Boy said goodbye to the people of the village, and he made his way back through the forest. But not once did the wind blow him. Not once did a branch snag him. No vines tripped him, and no animal sounds frightened him. Even the river was calm. And when at last Whole Boy arrived in the village where Whole Boy had begun his journey, he found the woman who had believed in him. She welcomed him home with her arms wide open, and Whole Boy laughed. That night, everyone in the village feasted, sang, and danced in celebration of his wholeness. And that is my story. And now Margaret will share another one with you.
This is called The Otters and the Seaweed by Teddy Macker. This is what you need to know. You need to know that otters wrap themselves in seaweed, so they won't, while sleeping at night, float out to sea. Are you imagining this? Can you see the otters actually doing this? Does it break your heart a little? Does it seduce you just a bit into loving more this odd, hard world? Otters, wrap yourselves tight and sleep exactly like you do, floating but seaweed held in our salty living waters. Oh, otters, wrap yourselves tight. And you, the one who doesn't tether himself down right, we are with you as you float away. We are with you as you sleep and lose yourself in the night.
And now I invite you into a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. As we spend this time together, I invite you to settle into the space where you are and begin to notice your breath as it travels in through your nose and your mouth and down into your belly, your lungs, and then back out again. Notice its movement. As you take a breath in, let air fill your belly and then your lungs. As you breathe out, let your lungs exhale, and then keep breathing out until your belly is also empty of air. Notice air traveling deeply into you. As you breathe in your connection to this world, this congregation. As you breathe out, let your cares seep out of your body to be held by this community. As you breathe in your connection to the earth below our feet. As you breathe out again, let your concerns seep into the earth. As you breathe in, feel the energy of this place feed you. As you breathe out again, let your stresses seep into the ground. And now I invite you to breathe in deeply and out slowly in silence. Breathing in your connections, all of our connections. Breathing out with letting cares, concerns, and stresses seep into the spaces that hold all of us.
I hear your call singing. Storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still calming my fear, my tears, all the years despite all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain singing, calming my fears, quenching my tears through all the years, singing.
This reading is from Heart Talk by Cleo Wade. What I lost and what I gained. And then I realized that to be more alive, I had to be less afraid. So I did it. I lost my fear and gained my whole life.
How is it with your spirit today? When I was in seminary, about halfway through, I began seeing a spiritual director. At the time, I was beginning to feel stretched thin and exhausted by all the academic and deep inner work and balancing that with the caregiving I was doing. My spiritual director would ask me that question. I'd never thought about it before, at least not that way, and perhaps that's why I'd experienced burnout a few years before. Now I ask myself that question, how is it with your spirit today, daily, and I've added one more. How is it with your heart today? Asking about our hearts, our spirits, seems even more important to me after doing a chaplaincy internship, becoming a minister, and living through a pandemic and social and political turmoil with 2 congregations. As I see the strain that so many of us are under, there's so much on and in our hearts each day of both suffering and of joy. There's a base exhaustion that many of us feel from navigating the tasks of our daily lives alongside the challenging changes of the pandemic. Living always changes us. Living through the last 2 years, even more so. Although many of us still aren't sure how, even though we feel the changes happening. Even if we don't accept the invitation to do spiritual and emotional work that can give us greater access to joy, grounding, and help sustain us, we know that the deeper work is there to be done, inviting us. And if we do accept the invitation, the work is challenging, even while it's incredibly life-giving. In one's quest to be happy and just get through to the next thing, it can be very, very tempting to accentuate the positive, denotate the negative, and don't mess with Mr. In between. However, developing our own sense of self and understanding meaning, purpose, worth, and responsibility is based on being attentive to our whole experience. Embracing our whole experience might be scary, but in doing so, perhaps we might gain our whole lives. And so I ask you, what would it mean to welcome your whole experience, your whole self? Welcoming our whole experience, our whole selves, isn't easy. It means asking, how is it with my heart today? How is it with my spirit today? And waiting patiently for answers that may not come easily and may have many layers. Now, I don't know about you, but I can get so wrapped up in everything that's happening in my life, in my work, that I can forget to be patient, even still. I can lose sight of the forest for the trees. I can forget to be mindful. We all need ways to keep ourselves present in the midst of having too many things to do and too many people and needs tugging on our hearts and minds. And as we come to the realization that there will probably always be too many people and too many needs tugging on our hearts and minds. The great theologian, Dr. Howard Thurman, wrote in Deep is the Hunger, "We must find sources of strength and renewal for our own spirits, lest we perish. The first step in the discovery of sources of strength and renewal is to develop the art of being still, physical and mental cessation from churning. This is not all, but it is the point at which we begin." Now, there are many ways that we can keep ourselves centered and integrated so that we can keep welcoming our whole experience and be more fully present in our lives, rather than numbing or tuning out, which has its place, but doesn't give us the deep gifts that sustain us long term. There are many ways that we attend to the presence of the sacred, that we nurture our hearts and our spirits, our whole selves. There are many ways we can find our bearings when we do float away from being present. Spiritual practices help us check into the deepest aspects of life. By nurturing a spiritual practice or practices that helps us intentionally spend time with ourselves and connecting to something greater than us, to the interdependent web of existence, or to the divine, whatever we call it, that helps us co-regulate ourselves. We nourish our hearts and replenish our deep well of energy from which we must draw to sustain our lives. There are many types of spiritual practices. My own practices have changed throughout my life and continue to change as my life and needs change. For years, hiking has been a spiritual practice, no matter where I've lived, no matter what landscape. I've practiced different forms of meditation and prayer over the years too, including building an altar of items that connect and center me a few years ago, and that's traveled with me. For others, and at times for me, reading or writing poetry is a spiritual practice. Listening to or making music, which is poetry of another sort, is another. Creating visual art is an important spiritual practice to me, as is gardening. For others, running, knitting, or yoga, or many other things may be a spiritual practice. What unites these and makes them spiritual practices, or not, is the quality of awareness or mindfulness that we bring to them. And in a turn of phrase that helped me understand my spirituality, my humanism better, Dr. Howard Thurman speaks of the spiritual practice of experiencing people as human beings as a spiritual practice. Cultivating community, our relationships and connections, that can enrich us deeply. Now, we all drift away from being present. This sometimes happens when we get swept up in the busyness of stuff that needs to happen or being helpful. And it can also happen when we find ourselves caught by fear. Amanda Gorman, in an essay in the New York Times that appeared on January 20th, this past week, just a few days ago, wrote of the fear she felt when she was thinking about and then preparing to read The Hill We Climb at President Biden's inauguration. Here is some of what she wrote. "I'm a firm believer that often terror is trying to tell us of a force far greater than despair. In this way, I look at fear not as cowardice, but as a call forward, a summons to fight for what we hold dear. And now, more than ever, we have every right to be affected, afflicted, affronted. If you're alive, you're afraid. If you're not afraid, then you're not paying attention. The only thing we have to fear is having no fear itself, having no feeling on behalf of whom and what we've lost, whom and what we love. And she goes on to share, on that January 20th a year ago, what I found waiting beyond my fear was all those who searched beyond their own fears to find space for hope in their lives, who welcomed the impact of a poem into protests, hospitals, classrooms, conversations, living rooms, offices, art, and all manner of moments. I may have worked on the words, but it was other people who put those words to work. What we've seen isn't just the power of a poem, it's the power of the people. Yet while the inauguration might have seemed like a ray of light, this past year for many has felt like a return to the same old gloom. Our nation is still haunted by disease, inequality, and environmental crisis. But though our fears may be the same, we are not. If nothing else, this must be known. Even as we've grieved, we've grown. Even fatigued, we've found that this hill we climb is one we must mount together. We are battered, but bolder, worn, but wiser. I'm not telling you to not be tired or afraid. If anything, the very fact that we're weary means we are, by definition, changed. We are brave enough to listen to and learn from our fear. This time will be different, because this time we'll be different. We already are. And yes, I still am terrified every day. Yet fear can be love trying its best in the dark. So do not fear your fear. Own it. Free it. This isn't a liberation that I or anyone can give you. It's a power you must look for, learn, love, lead, and locate for yourself. Why? The truth is, hope isn't a promise we give. It's a promise we live. Tell it like this, and we, like our words, will not rest. And the rest is history. And so, Amanda Gorman, as well as telling us about hope and helping us think about the practices that help us free ourselves from fear, is sharing something about how we co-regulate ourselves. We do not live in isolation. We have always known this deep down. However much our larger culture has tried to teach us that we are independent and wholly self-reliant, rather, from our first moments, we know that we co-regulate ourselves with the larger web of existence. As Reverend Elizabeth Mount shared in the reading that I began this service with, from our very first breath, we reach out. Co-regulation, not self-regulation, is our nature. We find cues from the sun and the moon, from each parent and caregiver. We find our place in this turning planet by turning to one another, generation to generation. We awaken to the dawn and then fall asleep at evening's end. Our life's journey is part of something greater, something simple, something divine. A flame cannot be lit without a spark. A life cannot begin without air. And we cannot begin to find ourselves without love. And so, as we identify and practice and deepen in the spiritual practices that help us connect with our hearts, our spirits, it's important that we intentionally cultivate practices that help us co-regulate ourselves, that help us experience other people as human beings, and other beings as fully here, as connected to and sustaining us, that we find practices that lead us to community care. Being present can be as much about attention to connection and community as it is about our inner experience. Cultivating spiritual practices give us energy for our daily lives, as well as nourishing our hearts. They can give us strength, courage, patience, and love to live our values and ethics in the world, to move through fear. And so, as we draw to the end of our time together, I invite you to share with us the practices that help you nourish your heart as part of the community, that help you bind yourselves to each other, to the rest of existence, to the eternal, that help you swim to the other side. Let's create a word cloud of these practices together. Up on the screen in just a moment, you'll be seeing directions for the website to go to add your words to this word cloud. If you can't get there, put your words in the chat, and Dan Gall will try to add them to our word cloud. Let's watch it grow. I see so many beautiful things growing as we share what helps us nourish our hearts as part of our communities. Thank you for sharing these. I hope you keep adding them. May these practices we share nourish our hearts and our spirits and bind us more fully to this beautiful, sacred world. Thank you. Amen. Blessed be.
I couldn't see the word cloud from where I was sitting. I really hope somebody put seaweed in there, and if not, please do now. Thank you. How we give, what we do with our lives, our time, and our resources is a reflection of our values. In response to the abundance we are blessed with, every week this congregation donates generously to organizations in the community whose work aligns with our values and principles. Our community partner agency this month is the Abbey Center for Community Mental Health. The professional staff of the Abbey Center, located in the Towncrest area of Iowa City, seek to improve lives in our community through the integration of mental health and wellness services. Physician, nurse practitioner, and social work services are available weekdays by appointment. On the screen, you will see instructions for how to give online, or you may take this time to write a check and address an envelope to UUS to be put in the mail. You may assist our community partner, contribute to the congregation to provide additional support for our operating expenses, or contribute towards your pledge to our society. The offering is a sign of commitment to this free congregation, which is completely supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join with us. As we give and receive the offering, may we be transformed by our giving, and may the world be transformed by our gifts. Nurturing gratitude and how we understand and express interdependence is part of how we live into our Unitarian Universalist faith. May what has been shared today help us more fully affirm our interconnection and live into love and justice. Immediately after the service, we will have time for all to join in conversation and community online. And now, to close our service today, we will sing Swimming to the Other Side by Emma's Revolution. Alex and Shinwei.
It might seem a little bit cruel to sing about swimming right now, but I hope you'll join in. There's quite a few words, so I hope you'll at least join in on the chorus here that you'll see on the screen. We are living neath a great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. I'm alone, and I am searching, hungering for answers in my time. I am balanced on the brink of wisdom. I'm impatient to receive a sign. I move forward with my senses open. Imperfection, it will be my crime. In humility, I will listen. We're all swimming to the other side. We are living neath a great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. On this journey through thoughts and feelings, binding intuition, my head, my heart, I am gathering the tools together. I'm preparing to do my part. All of those who have come before me, join together and be my guide. Loving lessons that I will follow. We're all swimming to the other side. We are living neath a great big dipper. We are washed in the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings that we live beside. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side. Get there, we'll discover all of the gifts we've been given here have been with us since life's beginning, and we never noticed they were there. We can balance on the brink of wisdom, never recognizing that we've arrived. Loving spirits will live together. We're all swimming to the other side. We are living neath a great big dipper. We are washed by the very same rain. We are swimming in the stream together, some in power and some in pain. We can worship this ground we walk on, cherishing the beings guide. Loving spirits will live forever. We're all swimming to the other side.
Join me in the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again.
as we move into the week ahead, may we all keep reaching out, keep helping each other bind ourselves more tightly when we may slip away. May we keep helping each other swim to the other side, whether in power or in pain or in fear, but always with love. And may we all go in peace, love, and justice, living love ever more fully and fiercely into the world today and all days. Amen and blessed, blessed be. And if you'd like, please join in singing our choral benediction with our choir.